Welcome back to the Financial Symmetry Show, where we're passionate about helping you enhance today and enrich tomorrow in your financial life. A big part of that is crafting and funding your ideal retirement plan, but sometimes those plans can be derailed. Today we're talking specifically about when your best laid retirement plans are derailed by a terminal illness. We'll describe the top concerns for retirees facing a terminal diagnosis, financial considerations, and tax and planning strategies that can help to preserve assets and bring peace of mind for you and your family through this difficult period. Before we get started, I'm Allison Berger, and I'm joined today by Grace Cavantis. And Grace put together a great checklist for retirees facing a terminal illness. And we wanted to take the time to dig deeper into these circumstances and provide some more perspective. So Grace, obviously this is a very important topic and one that can be extremely overwhelming and most of us are not prepared for. So why don't we start with what some of the top concerns are when someone receives a terminal diagnosis?
First of all, it's very normal to feel scared, concerned about all the what ifs, or you may not know exactly how you feel, or it might change from moment to moment or day to day, and that's completely normal and okay. But I'll talk about 3 other primary concerns that come to mind when someone's diagnosed. And the first one is, can I afford care? So you might be meeting with a doctor or a number or team of doctors, and they're going to recommend all different types of care. So the primary concern tends to be, can I afford all that? The second main concern tends to be, will paying for this care deplete all of my family's money that we worked hard to build up? The third main concern that people have is, if they are the primary money manager for their household and their home, who's going to manage the household's finances if anything happens to me? And so again, that's a good concern to have, but we're going to talk about some ways that maybe we can help alleviate some of those concerns.
If you are facing this, again, we're very sorry that you're going through this. And some great resources that were actually recommended to me by clients are 2 books. One is called When Breath Becomes Air by Paul Kalanithi, and the other is called Being Mortal by Atul Gawande. And in Being Mortal, he really talks about death and dying and how that relates to the medical community. And one thing I've found really interesting in that is that medicine is all geared toward fighting to live, and death is sort of viewed as failure. So a lot of times conversations are framed in that way, but he encourages us to think about, what are we fighting for, which might be something you want to consider before a treatment plan starts. What we would encourage as well is that can be a golden window to accomplish critical financial tasks that might be outstanding, and it might also be an opportunity to think about things that you really want to do or accomplish with the remaining time that you have left, whether that's time with family. They used one example of a grandmother who really would like to take her grandchildren to Disney World while she still could, which may all be things that may be harder to achieve once a treatment plan starts. So I think early in this process is a very good opportunity to think about those things that you might want to still achieve, or time that you want to spend with loved ones, and also what are the critical tasks that need to get done. So Grace, I would say, as a financial advisor, what are some of your top concerns or things that you think might be overlooked during this time period?
I think when people are given a hard diagnosis, the list of to-dos can be very overwhelming. So hopefully we can give you just some clear items to focus on that will help out not only you and alleviate some of that, the what ifs and the stress that can pertain to your financial picture, but also the what ifs of, what's this going to mean for my family and my loved ones if I leave them behind. The 3 main categories we want you to focus on as financial planners are estate planning, investment planning, and tax planning. So I'm going to dive a little further into those. So first of all, estate planning. We recommend, if you do not have estate documents in place already, and that's going to include a last will and testament, a healthcare power of attorney, a financial power of attorney, and a living will, an advanced medical directive. But even if you do have them, we recommend that you review them just to see if anything's changed. For example, in those, you're going to have to list who you want as your power of attorney and backups in case they are unable or unwilling to serve. And so it's a great time to go to those people and first of all, let them know, hi, I have listed you as the trustee of my trust when I pass away in my will, are you willing to serve in that position? Are you still willing to serve in that position? Or if you have young children, you would list who would be their guardian should anything happen to you. And so, it might be a good time to check with those people or reevaluate if you want to change that. So estate documents are one of the first places we'd recommend focusing. Also, sometimes when you do assign those people, there can be instances where they are so emotionally distraught that it can be hard for them to serve. So also choose carefully who your successor, power of attorney, or trustees are. And it might be good to check in with them as well to see if they're willing to serve in those areas.
Another thing I was going to say we can think about when you're thinking about the estate planning is in a lot of people's wills, they'll say, I leave all of my personal property to my 3 children in equal shares. And one thing you could think about during this time is if you have special jewelry or other items that you'd like to go ahead and give to those individuals during your lifetime, that can be really meaningful to give those items rather than having people sort through and potentially fight over them after you're gone.
Yeah, that actually can be a huge source of conflict in families. So if you have not already specified in your will who specific items should go to, it is good to at least let your family know. And a big key in all of this is communication. So communicating really well with your loved ones or your financial planner or your estate attorney. Open communication makes all of this go so much more smoothly. So you can either communicate to them, hey, this is exactly who I want this to go to, but better yet, you could go ahead and gift it to them. That way, it's very clear. Everyone knows who is supposed to get the china set, and things, go where they should without conflict. So then the next area we recommend checking, and this one can be a pretty quick one, but checking the beneficiaries on things like if you have a 401k or an IRA or your annuity, life insurance policies. And it actually helps to maybe chart out exactly what dollar amounts from those accounts would be going to each beneficiary that you have listed. Because sometimes in our minds we think, oh, the way I've listed this is fair. But then when you look at actual dollar values, it might not be. And again, that can be another source of conflict for family members after you're gone. So double check beneficiaries, look at exactly how much would be going where. And another tip here is do not ever list as a beneficiary on a life insurance policy or an IRA that it should go to your estate. So we'll say the estate of Grace Cavantis. You should list out actual people or an actual trust. Otherwise, it is going to have to go through probate, and it is not designed to go through probate. You can avoid all of that, the hassle and the cost that comes along with that by not listing your estate as a beneficiary. The next thing that you might want to look at is what is your net worth? So what things do you own, your assets, versus what things do you owe, perhaps a mortgage or an auto loan, and make sure that your loved ones have clear visibility of that and that there's not any secret assets. Things like Bitcoin can be really difficult for other people to ever access, and especially if they have no idea you have it, that is probably going to just be gone if anything happens to you. So be very clear, do not hide any accounts. That helps just make sure that your money doesn't end up lost one day. So one thing to think about with the estate documents we already touched on briefly is listing your power of attorney. Now there's a power of attorney who can make healthcare decisions for you, but there's a different type of attorney who can make financial decisions for you. And that would be who could help with paying your bills in the event that you either don't feel well enough or that you've passed away and they still need to be paid. So that's someone who you could talk to or help teach and bring them alongside you as you're sick. And you can teach them how to handle those things or where passwords are or, who the electric bill gets paid to and where that payment should come from. Those kinds of things to just bring them alongside and teach them. And especially if it's a situation where there's spouses and one is sick and has always handled all the finances and the other has never done it before. It's a really important time to go ahead and invite them in alongside of you. And if it's baby steps, turning over, okay, you pay this credit card for the next month or depending on your timeline, it helps to go ahead and bring them in alongside of you, show them everything, maybe make really good notes because they might be overwhelmed and might not remember everything, but it's going to help alleviate a lot of stress for everyone if more people know how to take care of those things if and when the need comes.
And one I heard recently too on those power of attorney documents, we had an episode specifically on why a professionally prepared estate plan is important. That was episode number 165. And that is a big reason there. I know a lot of people will try to use an online service to just prepare things very cheaply and quickly. However, if you run into a situation like this, you're going to need to present those documents to the financial institutions so that your power of attorney, whether that's your spouse or your adult child, can make those decisions and those transactions on your behalf. And in our experience, those financial institutions can be very particular about the documents being in a specific way. So it will be beneficial to have an attorney who's available and able to help with the execution, make sure that those are accepted if they need to be changed or updated in any manner, so that they're able to be used when they need to be, which is obviously their intention.
Absolutely. Yes. You do not want any ambiguity in your estate documents. They need to be incredibly clear for your wishes to actually be what plays out. And so estate attorneys are absolutely the expert on making sure that happens correctly. That leads me to another item that we really strongly encourage you to focus on, which is letting your loved ones know your wishes. I've seen some very unfortunate situations where someone passed away and never explained to maybe a second marriage or their children what their wishes were. And there have been just horrible fights and families torn apart, never speaking to each other again, just because not everyone knew the decedent's wishes. And then there was a fight over it because they thought, I was owed more. It just helps to be clear and open and honest with everybody to help avoid that for your loved ones and really set them up for success in a time when they're all going to be hurting. And so emotions are high. And so it just helps to have everything be very clear, out in the open, how you want your accounts distributed, how you want your things distributed, the wishes for your body. That can be a hard one for your loved ones to accept. And then actually another really great thing to go ahead and think about, talk about, and plan is your funeral wishes. That also can bring a lot of fights. And I think primarily because it's just a time when people are hurting. And so designing your funeral plans can be really helpful ahead of time. I know a lot of us, we don't like to think about this stuff. We don't like to talk about it or deal with it, but I promise it is setting your loved ones up for success to address a lot of these things. And Allison talked about how there can be kind of a golden period between when you're diagnosed and when treatment starts. And so that's a great time to just knock as much of this stuff out as you can. That way, once you've started treatment, you can focus on just your body and healing and not on financial stress. And, I forgot to, tell my wife how to get into my email for an MFA code when she tries to log into the bank account. Just if you've already taken care of these things, everything else can go a lot more smoothly later on.
Yeah, when we talk about leading us into your next tip, really, you might be somebody who's still working, or maybe you still have some employer benefits that you might want to take advantage of, and thinking about if there's any disability insurance that might be available during this time.
If you have any disability insurance, long-term care insurance, anything that, or even Social Security disability insurance, anything that could potentially help you guys out financially, register for that as soon as you can, or go ahead and just try. See if you qualify, because if you do, insurance companies are notorious for delaying payment. So just the sooner you can take care of that, the sooner you'll probably receive payment, and the sooner you'll have extra money to help pay for that care that you're going to need. Another thing to check in on is your life insurance policies. Is there a cash value you can withdraw to pay for care? Is there an accelerated death benefit rider, which means pulling out money early before death, and it lowers the death benefit, but if you need that, that's one way to help pay for care. Another way you could, with a life insurance policy, pay for care is talk with the beneficiary who's going to inherit that and say, hey, could I borrow $10,000? You will get repaid through the life insurance policy when the time comes. That's another option there too, if you're struggling to pay for the care. Another item to check on is if you have annuities. I touched on that briefly earlier, but does it have a death benefit for your spouse or a child? Are there surrender fees if you surrendered that early, if you needed the money for care? Generally, surrender fees get waived in the case of death or terminal illness, so it's something to absolutely look into should you need to, or if you have an annuity. And then just looking at your tax rate versus your beneficiary's tax rate, that comes into play a lot on the investment side as well, that we will touch on. But that's something to be aware of. Would it be taxed at a lower rate if you pulled more out during your lifetime versus your beneficiary, or vice versa? Health insurance is another item to look at and just see what are your copays, what's your max out of pocket, what are your deductibles going to be. It's important to know what's your max out of pocket in network, but also what's your max out of pocket out of network, because a lot of alternative medicines are going to be out of network, and that max out of pocket can be quite high. So it's really important to know What are those max out of pockets, and do you have the money set aside or a way to obtain it to be able to pay for those?
About if you're still working, if you're still employed, it might be great to stay employed. For some people, continuing to work can be therapeutic. In addition to that, you probably have pretty good employer provided benefits. And we've even heard cases of coworkers will donate, vacation that they have banked up so that you have time to take off for treatment. So keeping that employment status can be helpful through this time if you're not retired yet.
It can, yeah. And if you're employed, when open enrollment comes around every year, you can look at, do I need a plan with more coverage to cover my doctors, my appointments, my treatments. So open enrollment is a key time to revisit all your coverages that you have through your employer if you're employed. And with medical expenses, because there are going to be a lot of them, it is really helpful, and I would say important, to create a spreadsheet to track all of those medical expenses. That leads us into the tax planning, but medical expenses are tax deductible once you get over 7.5% of your AGI on your tax return. And so because you're probably going to have really high health costs, it helps to keep a record of all of that, because at some point it's probably going to become tax deductible for you. So keep a spreadsheet and it also helps your loved ones too, but you to have record of what was owed, what's been paid, how it was paid, because if it's from an HSA, it's already been tax beneficial. You don't get to deduct that on the tax return, but it's really helpful to have a record of that for multiple reasons. One, you might have chemo brain and not be able to remember what you've paid and what you haven't, but also for the tax side of things. So, and tax planning is an area where a good financial planner can provide a lot of value if you're finding yourself in this position. Because like I said, medical expenses can add up quick. And so you want to make sure, if you qualify for that medical expense deduction, that you take it. So keeping up with things, in addition to just the regular and straightforward medical expenses, you can also track your mileage, lodging, because you can deduct up to $50 per person for up to 2 people per night in lodging on your taxes, nursing care, pharmacy records, right? These are things that normally probably wouldn't think to record, but that can be really helpful in this situation. And you can think about, if there's anyone else on your health insurance plan in your family, did they have any other medical, dental needs that, because you're probably already going to hit your family max out of pocket, that they could go ahead and get in that calendar year as well. Also on the tax planning side, you can generate income to offset the deductions. And so whether or not that might be taking an extra $10,000 out of your IRA that year, or retirement account distributions that are taxable, or Roth conversions. These are things that you might want to get help from a financial planner or a tax preparer, but they're areas that can add a lot of value on the tax side. You could take capital losses to reduce income, because the gains and losses will be reset to zero starting on the date of death. So I won't get too detailed here because I think it can make people's heads spin, but there's just a lot of value that can be added through tax planning, even though it might sound like the last thing you want to do.
Yeah, we might want to think about too, if someone's married, they may have a short window where they're still going to be married filing jointly. Typically, if you're a head of household, a widow or a widower with children, you might be able to use those married filing joint rates for another 1 to 2 years. But then you're going to be on the single tax tables, which are less beneficial for the surviving spouse. So we might want to think about taking advantage of the married filing joint tax status while you're still able to.
And that leads us into investment planning. This is a recommendation for anyone, no matter who you are, but it's really helpful to simplify your accounts. So if you have a brokerage at 2 different places, you could simplify it and transfer one into the other, right? So simplifying and having fewer accounts makes everything so much easier. It makes it easier for you to know where your accounts are, what the balances are, but also makes it easier if those accounts are going to be distributed at some point to your loved ones. So you can do transfers, rollovers, close excess bank accounts. If you're like me, I have a couple bank accounts out there that I never use, but I also just have never closed because I just haven't done it. So, it would be a good time to go ahead and do things like that to simplify your financial picture. Something else you might want to do is, if you have old stock certificates, like the paper, go ahead and deposit those into a brokerage account. That's going to make things a lot simpler with distribution of assets as well. If you are the owner listed on a 529 account or a UTMA or a UGMA account, now these are accounts for children. So if you've saved for either grandchild or your own child, go ahead and remove yourself as the owner of that account, because those are a nightmare to transfer to a new owner once you've passed away. So remove yourself from 529s, UTMA accounts. And next would be considering cashing out any old savings bonds, because those are also very difficult to transfer after death. If you do not have a TOD provision on your brokerage accounts, or if your financial planner or a state attorney recommends it, add a TOD provision to any brokerage accounts that allows you to add beneficiaries on the account. So it can pass directly to them instead of, one option is it could go into a trust and then be distributed to them, or it could have to go through probate and then distributed to them. But this cuts out the middleman. So if that's if that's an ideal scenario in your situation, and according to you, but also, the professionals in your life, then that's something you should add. And you should revisit your investment strategy. So how are your investments set up? If those investments go to your heirs, does that still make sense? Does the strategy still make sense? And so should anything be updated now? Should anything be updated, later? That's something to evaluate as well.
Yeah, I think those are great points. Thinking about what's the investment strategy, and does it need to be adjusted, one, to account for withdrawals that might be happening, to, either pay for care or pay for, trips or things that you want to do, time that you want to spend with loved ones. Maybe that needs an adjustment, or maybe it needs an adjustment to account for a longer time horizon if those accounts will be going towards your beneficiaries.
Another recommendation is we call a love letter to your family. And this can come in many different forms, but it can be something in which you list your family history, which can be really precious for your descendants to have. Or you could tell your story. Perhaps your kids have never heard your whole, childhood story, and so that can be really beautiful for them to have. And then also you can share in it, if you choose, your hopes and your dreams for them, what you hope they'll become like, or what you hope they'll achieve in life, and maybe give them some wiggle room, right? Like, if I want my son to be a doctor and he doesn't become a doctor one day, he might be a little disappointed. But things like, I hope that you're an honest person and with integrity and that you love others well. Things like that, I think, can be really impactful for people to hear as well.
Yeah, that's great. And I know this is a really heavy topic. So if we're thinking in terms of progress principles from this episode, I think what stands out to me is to enlist help early, from both family members and from professionals, so that you have the time. Really simplify things as much as possible on the investment and the tax and the estate side. Consolidate assets as much as you can, make things clean, and then communicate while you're feeling well, and then when you're not, and the ability to take breaks along the way as needed. And so, in conclusion, we work with clients across the country to build their ideal retirements, but we know that life does not always go according to plan. And that's why we always say financial planning is a process, not a one-time plan. So there's going to be many course corrections necessary along the way. If you or a loved one has been through this experience and you have additional checklist items we may have missed, we would love to hear from you. Alternately, if you had other unforeseen circumstances derail your retirement, please reach out and we might be able to address it in one of our episodes. We put these podcasts together every 2 weeks. Please subscribe if you don't want to miss the next episode.